Hi, my name is Vinh Tran with First Integrity Mortgage in St. Louis. I want to introduce you to Michelle, who's our DE underwriter with our company.
Hi, thank you.
In this little video, we're going to talk about the getting to closing and what that all looks like. Certainly part of that process, making sure that we have your documents for Michelle to do her job. And then really as part of your consulting in this process that we are communicating well together and having you be able to get those documents in a timely manner. And then we'll talk a little bit about funds to closing and then ultimately the big happy day of closing the loan. When it comes to documentation, the typical documents I'll need from you are your driver's license, 2 years of tax return, and W-2s that correlate to those 2 years, and also 2 months of bank statements, paid stub, and proof of insurance. Now ideally, I should have those documents already in hand by the time you have an accepted contract, but in the outside chance I don't, that's where I'm going to have to encourage you as a client to really get those to me as quickly as possible, because once the contract is accepted, we have a commitment date, we have a closing date, and we have deadlines that we all want to fulfill through this process.
Correct. And those are the typical documents that we would ask for. Me as an underwriter, I may ask you for additional documentation according to agency and government guidelines. So keep in mind that I may come back and ask for, say if you're self-employed, I'm going to make sure that we have K-1s in the file, as well as sometimes partnership returns. Schedule C, self-employment, I need to make sure that we have all of those existing schedules with your tax returns. And then when it comes to deposits on your bank statements, if there's any large deposits other than payroll-related deposits, then we'll have to address those as well.
Now, as your mortgage banker, I balance a couple things. I balance the fact that you have a life and you need to live life. Also balance the fact that you have commitments in this loan process that I need to be the professional that drives for those commitment dates to be adhered to. And so ultimately when I'm asking for some documents from you, it is because I'm trying to serve your purpose of getting to closing on time.
As a borrower, you play a very important role in this process. For us, it's really important for you to be an open book up front when you meet with your loan officer. Any information that you think could pertain to your loan approval process would be greatly appreciated with that information up front.
Just like an attorney can't represent you well if they don't know all the facts about your situation, I feel like I'm in the same exact boat. So the more that I know, there's no surprises. Surprises typically cause either delay or actually kills a loan process altogether. An example of surprise would be child support, separate maintenance that a client might not have disclosed to me, and then we find out about it in some other way much too far down the process.
Right, and when I'm reviewing your loan, if I find that information, then I have to stop my process and then ask you for further documentation, such as a copy of your divorce decree or child support order. And just keep in mind, any of those additional liabilities can negatively impact your loan approval.
Yeah, more than ever, we are in a very highly regulated industry at this point. Now, my goal and motivation is to make the process as painless as possible. Notice I didn't promise pain-free, but as painless as possible, and also to help you have a great experience through this process and being smooth, and we can do that together.
Just remember, we are on your side, both Vin and I.
Absolutely. Now, I'd like to talk about assets. Assets are basically your checking account, your savings account, perhaps a mutual fund, a retirement account, money that you're going to use to bring to closing of your property. Now, in the post 9/11 world that we live in, where money laundering is a big deal for the government, we have a lot of compliance requirements that we have to make sure that the money that you have as a law-abiding citizen bring to the table is legitimate. The government doesn't look at you any differently than a terrorist in that sense.
Right. So verifying funds to close, we have to have a paper trail of the documentation for where your funds are coming from, which means all pages of all of your statements. I have to have a copy of all of those. Also, when I'm looking at your asset statements for deposits, if there's any large deposits other than your existing payroll deposits, then we'll have to inquire about those. One of those could be gift funds. If you're receiving gift funds from your family member in order to close on your home, that just has to be documented in a certain way, so we'll have to follow those guidelines. The other deposits are important because we're establishing your employment history and the regularity of your deposits for your payroll.
Yeah, when you're working with me as a professional in this field, it's important that we have this level of trust enough to know that what I'm asking from you are not because I want to make life miserable for you. Okay, if it's miserable for you, it can be miserable for me as well. Literally, yeah, and as well as Michelle. But when we ask you for these documents, it is because they're required for the file and for us to get the closing. So, I hope that you keep that in mind as we go through that process. The next topic I'd like to cover is the actual closing. By this point, Michelle would have done all of her work that she needs to do and sign up on all the different conditions within the file, and then the file goes to the title company to work with us on getting your figures to close.
Right, your coordinator will start working on our end of the closing fees for the settlement statement. And then she will be communicating with the title company to get their fees and balancing the settlement statement in between the two of us. Once that is done, then we'll send an email to you and to Vinh and letting him know what your bottom line is for closing and that you'll need a cashier's check made payable to the title company for that. Also, keep in mind it's really important to share your closing time and coordinate that with Vinh. He'll want to be there with your closing so that you get everything signed correctly and just to see that happy moment for you. The last thing is to keep in mind that we will be doing an employment check right before closing, and we'll be doing a soft pull credit. So we may need additional, a letter of explanation if you have another inquiry at that time.
Yeah, we're getting to the happy day of closing, and obviously there's a couple of days prior to closing. There a lot of work still has to be done to make it happen. But typically, what I do is to really paint you a good picture, like we're doing right now, of an expectation, so that you know that these few days you have to be available for us to work through whatever last minute issues there may be with your file.
I realize we've covered a lot of information in this video and that you may have additional questions regarding this information. Just get in touch with Vinh and he can help you through any of it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again for this time. I hope the information is helpful to you. Again, call me if you have any questions pertaining to your very specific situation. Love the opportunity to work with you, and I look forward to being of help.